My mother-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, she shouldn't be hosting anyone, she's barely holding it together. What she didn't know was that my daughter was listening from the kitchen. I'm Sarah Chen, and I never thought I'd be the mother caught between protecting my child and letting her prove herself to the world. 3 months ago, everything changed when my 16-year-old daughter Emma was in a car accident that left her best friend fighting for her life in the ICU. The physical injuries healed quickly, but the emotional scars ran deeper than any of us realized. Emma used to be the kind of teenager who lit up every room she entered. She was student council president, captain of the debate team, and the friend everyone called when they needed someone to listen. Our house was always full of laughter, music, and the chaos that comes with being the unofficial headquarters for her entire social circle. Every year since she turned 12, Emma hosted elaborate birthday parties that became legendary in our neighborhood. She'd spend weeks planning themes, coordinating decorations, and making sure every detail was perfect. But after the accident, that vibrant girl seemed to disappear overnight. The Emma who came home from the hospital was quieter, more fragile, jumping at sudden sounds and struggling with nightmares that left her exhausted during the day. Her friends tried to include her, but she'd make excuses to avoid gatherings. She stopped volunteering for class presentations and quit the debate team entirely. My husband David, bless his heart, wanted to wrap her in bubble wrap and keep her safe from anything that might cause more pain. He's always been the steady, practical one in our marriage. But seeing his daughter struggle broke something in him, too. His mother, Linda, well, she's never been one to keep her opinions to herself, and she made it clear that she thought we were handling Emma's recovery all wrong. Linda Morrison is the kind of woman who believes that acknowledging mental health struggles is a sign of weakness. She raised David with the pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality that worked for her generation, but completely missed the mark with Emma's situation. At 68, Linda has strong opinions about everything from how we discipline our children to what we serve for dinner, and she's never hesitated to share those opinions whether we ask for them or not. Then there's our neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who somehow always knows everyone's business before they know it themselves. She's not malicious, exactly, but she has a way of spreading information that makes private struggles feel like public spectacles. In a neighborhood where everyone knows everyone, having a teenager dealing with trauma becomes community gossip faster than you can imagine. The real turning point came 6 weeks ago when Emma announced she wanted to host her 17th birthday party as planned. I watched her face as she made this declaration, and I saw something I hadn't seen since before the accident: determination. Not the reckless kind that ignores reality, but the fierce kind that acknowledges fear and decides to face it anyway. "Mom, I need to do this," she said, her voice steady, despite the slight tremor in her hands. "Everyone's treating me like I'm made of glass, and I'm starting to believe them. But I'm not broken, and I need to prove that to myself as much as to everyone else." David immediately started listing reasons why it was too soon, too risky, too much pressure. Linda was even more direct. "That girl can barely get through a school day without falling apart. What makes you think she can handle a house full of teenagers?" But I saw something in Emma's eyes that reminded me of the daughter I knew was still there, buried under layers of trauma and self-doubt. She wasn't asking for permission to pretend everything was fine. She was asking for the chance to take back control of her own narrative. The problem was, everyone else seemed determined to write that narrative for her. Linda had made it her mission to protect Emma by limiting her exposure to anything that might trigger her anxiety. Mrs. Rodriguez was spreading word around the neighborhood about Emma's episodes, as she called them, including the day Emma had a panic attack in the grocery store parking lot when a car backfired. Standing in my kitchen that morning, watching my daughter gather the courage to reclaim a piece of her identity, while my mother-in-law prepared to tear it down, I realized this wasn't just about a birthday party. This was about whether Emma would be defined by the worst thing that ever happened to her, or whether she'd find a way to define herself despite it. What happened next changed everything. Living with Emma after the accident was like watching someone trying to rebuild themselves from the inside out while pretending nothing had changed. On the surface, she maintained her 4.0 GPA, never missed a homework assignment, and showed up to every family dinner with a smile that almost looked genuine. But I was her mother. I knew the difference between her real smile and the one she wore like armor. The nightmares started 2 weeks after she came home from the hospital. I'd hear her crying out in the middle of the night, sometimes calling for her best friend, Maya, sometimes just making sounds that broke my heart. When I'd rush to her room, she'd already be sitting up, wide awake, telling me she was fine and that I should go back to bed. The first few times, I believed her. By the 10th time, I started sleeping with my door open so I could hear her better. During the day, Emma functioned like a perfectly programmed robot. She'd wake up at exactly 6:30, shower, dress in clothes that matched impeccably, eat breakfast without really tasting it, and head to school with her backpack perfectly organized. Her teachers called to tell me how impressed they were with her resilience, how she never used the accident as an excuse for anything. What they didn't see was how she'd come home and immediately go to her room, claiming she had studying to do, then sit at her desk staring at the same page for hours. David handled it the way he handles everything difficult, by trying to fix it with logic and protection. He researched therapists, bought self-help books, and suggested family activities that might help Emma process her trauma. When she politely declined most of his suggestions, he started talking about homeschooling, about moving to a different neighborhood, about anything that might shield her from potential triggers. "She needs time, Sarah," he'd say during our late-night conversations. "She's been through something terrible. Maybe we should just let her heal quietly instead of pushing her back into situations that might hurt her more." I understood his instinct, but I also saw what he was missing. Emma wasn't just healing, she was disappearing. Every day she became a little more of a shadow of who she used to be. Her friends still called, but she'd make excuses. Chloe, her closest friend after Maya, tried organizing small gatherings. But Emma would suddenly remember a test she needed to study for or a project she'd forgotten about. The breaking point came during our weekly grocery trip. We were in the parking lot loading bags into the car when someone in the next aisle slammed their trunk shut. The sound was sharp and sudden, like metal hitting metal, and Emma immediately dropped to a crouch behind our car, hyperventilating and shaking uncontrollably. It took me 15 minutes to calm her down, and I could see other shoppers staring, some with sympathy, others with curiosity that felt invasive. That night, Emma came to my room after David had fallen asleep. She sat on the edge of my bed and said, "I can't live like this anymore, Mom. I can't keep jumping at every sound and avoiding everything that used to make me happy. I feel like I'm disappearing." That's when she told me about her plan to host her birthday party. Not just any gathering, but the full production she'd been famous for since middle school. Themed decorations, carefully curated playlist, homemade cake, and invitations to everyone in her class. "I know it sounds crazy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know everyone thinks I can't handle it. But Mom, if I don't try now, when will I? If I keep letting fear make my decisions, I'll never get myself back." I watched my daughter in the dim light from the hallway, seeing both the fragile girl who'd been through trauma and the determined young woman who refused to let that trauma win. Her hands were shaking as she spoke, but her voice was steady. "What if something goes wrong?" I asked, not because I wanted to discourage her, but because I needed to know she'd thought it through. "Then something goes wrong," she said simply, "but at least I'll know I tried. At least I'll know I didn't just give up on being me." In that moment, I realized this wasn't about a party at all. This was about Emma fighting for her identity, for her right to be more than just a victim of circumstances beyond her control. And suddenly, I knew that my job wasn't to protect her from potentially failing. It was to support her in trying to succeed. The morning Linda arrived to help with party preparations, I knew we were in for a battle. She walked into our kitchen carrying a casserole dish and wearing the expression she reserves for situations she considers disasters in progress. Emma was at the dining table, carefully writing out place cards for each guest, her tongue slightly poking out in concentration, the way it had since she was 5 years old. "Well," Linda announced, setting down her dish with more force than necessary, "I certainly hope you know what you're doing, Sarah." Before I could respond, she turned to Emma with that voice adults use when they're about to deliver unwelcome wisdom. "Sweetheart, are you sure you're ready for this? There's no shame in waiting until you're feeling stronger." Emma's hand paused over the place card she was decorating. "I'm feeling fine, Grandma Linda. Really." Linda said, which was her way of saying she disagreed without directly arguing. She pulled me aside into the kitchen. far enough from Emma that she thought our conversation would be private. "Sarah, I've been thinking about this all week, and I really believe you're making a mistake." "Linda, Emma needs stability and quiet while she recovers," Linda interrupted. "She needs to process what happened, not pretend it didn't happen by throwing herself into social situations she's not equipped to handle." I could feel my jaw tightening. She's not pretending anything didn't happen. She's trying to move forward. Is she? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she's setting herself up for another breakdown. And when that happens, who's going to pick up the pieces? You? David? The poor girl has been through enough. That's when my phone rang. Mrs. Rodriguez's name appeared on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. But in a moment of weakness, I picked up. "Sarah, honey, I hope you don't mind me calling," she began in that tone that meant she absolutely knew I'd mind. "I ran into Chloe's mother at the grocery store yesterday, and she mentioned Emma's party. I just wanted to check in because, well, I'm worried." "Worried about what, exactly?" "Well, you know how Emma has been lately. My heart just breaks for that girl. I heard about what happened at school last week with the fire drill, and then there was that incident in the parking lot. I just think maybe it's too soon for her to be entertaining. What if something happens?" The incident at school. I'd hoped that wouldn't become neighborhood gossip, but apparently nothing stays private in our community. Emma had indeed had a panic attack during a fire drill when the alarm went off unexpectedly. Her guidance counselor had called to let me know she'd handled it well using breathing techniques her therapist had taught her, but evidently, word had spread. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not trying to interfere, dear. I just think you might want to consider whether this is really in Emma's best interest. Maybe a small family gathering would be more appropriate." After I hung up, I found Linda nodding knowingly. "See? Even the neighbors are concerned. Sometimes being a good parent means protecting your child from their own poor decisions." That's when I heard it, a sharp intake of breath from the dining room. Emma had stopped writing and was sitting very still, her shoulders rigid with tension. She'd heard everything. "Emma," I called softly. She looked up and I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. Not sadness, not fear, but a kind of resigned defeat that was somehow worse than both. "Maybe they're right," she said quietly. "Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'm fooling myself thinking I can handle this." "Emma, no. I heard what Mrs. Rodriguez said about the fire drill. I heard Grandma Linda talking about me having another breakdown. Maybe I should just cancel the whole thing." Linda practically radiated satisfaction. "Sweetheart, that's very mature of you. There's nothing wrong with admitting when something is too much." But I was watching Emma's face, and I could see the exact moment when she started to disappear again. The light in her eyes dimmed, her shoulders sagged, and she began folding in on herself the way she had in those first weeks after the accident. "Emma," I said firmly, "go to your room for a minute. I need to have a conversation with your grandmother." After Emma left, I turned to Linda. "You need to stop. Right now. I'm trying to help. You're trying to control. There's a difference. Emma is not broken, and she doesn't need to be fixed. She needs to be supported while she figures out how to be herself again." But the damage was already done. Upstairs, I could hear Emma's bedroom door close, and I knew she was questioning everything she'd fought so hard to believe about herself. After Linda left with her casserole and her unsolicited opinions, I stood in my kitchen staring at the half-finished place cards scattered across the dining table. The house felt heavy with the weight of doubt and discouragement. Upstairs, Emma's room was silent in a way that worried me more than if she'd been crying. David came home from work to find me sitting at the kitchen counter, turning one of Emma's handmade invitations over in my hands. The card was decorated with tiny silver stars and Emma's careful handwriting that spelled out, "Celebrating 17 years of Emma in elegant script." "How did it go today?" he asked, though my expression probably told him everything he needed to know. "Your mother thinks we're making a terrible mistake. Mrs. Rodriguez called to express her concerns, and Emma heard enough of it to start doubting herself again." David sank into the chair across from me, running his hands through his hair. "Maybe they have a point, Sarah. Maybe we're pushing too hard too fast." That's when something crystallized inside me, I looked at my husband, this good, caring man who wanted to protect our daughter from any possible pain, and I realized that protection and support aren't always the same thing. "David," I said carefully, "what if we're wrong? What if everyone is wrong? What if Emma knows herself better than we think she does? But what if she doesn't? What if she has another panic attack in front of all her friends? What if—" "What if she doesn't?" I interrupted. "What if she surprises all of us? What if instead of assuming she'll fail, we help her succeed?" I went upstairs and knocked gently on Emma's door. When she didn't answer, I opened it slowly. She was lying on her bed staring at the ceiling, still wearing the clothes she'd put on so carefully that morning to work on party preparations. "Hey," I said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I think I should cancel it, Mom. Everyone's right. I'm not ready." "Emma, look at me." When she turned her head, I saw my daughter's eyes red from crying, but also something else. A flicker of the fight that had made her want to host this party in the first place. "Do you want to cancel it, or do you think you should cancel it? There's a difference." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't want to cancel it, but I'm scared that if something goes wrong, everyone will say they were right about me." "And what if something goes right? What if you have the most amazing party you've ever thrown, and you remember what it feels like to be proud of yourself again? What if I can't handle it? Then we'll handle it together. But Emma, I need you to understand something. Your healing journey is yours to navigate, not Grandma Linda's, not Mrs. Rodriguez's, not even mine. You get to decide what you're ready for." I took her hands in mine. "Here's what I propose. We continue with the party, but we create a plan. We set up safe spaces where you can take breaks if you need them. We have a signal system, so I'll know if you need support without making a scene. We invite your friends knowing that they care about you, not because they want to watch you fail." Emma sat up slowly. "You really think I can do this?" "I think you're the strongest person I know. I think you've been through something terrible, and instead of letting it destroy you, you're fighting to rebuild yourself. That's not weakness, Emma. That's courage. What about Grandma Linda? What about what everyone's saying? Let me worry about Grandma Linda. And as for everyone else, they don't get a vote in your life unless you give them one." We spent the next hour creating our plan. Emma would practice her breathing exercises every morning leading up to the party. We'd arrange the house so she had multiple places to step away if she needed space. I'd stay close enough to help, but far enough away to let her handle things independently. Most importantly, we'd remember that this party was about celebration, not perfection. The next morning, I called Linda back. "Linda, I need you to understand something. Emma is hosting this party, and it's happening with or without your support. You can choose to be part of her success story, or you can choose to stay home. But you will not undermine her confidence anymore." There was a long pause. "Sarah, I just don't want to see her get hurt." "Neither do I, but sometimes the biggest hurt comes from not trying at all." After I hung up, Emma appeared in the kitchen, showered and dressed, ready to continue preparing for her party. "Mom," she said, "thank you for believing in me even when I don't believe in myself." That's when I knew we'd made the right choice. The night of the party, our house hummed with nervous energy. Emma had spent 3 hours getting ready, changing outfits twice before settling on a deep blue dress that brought out her eyes and made her look confident and radiant. I watched her apply lipstick in the hallway mirror, her hands steady for the first time in months, and I felt a surge of pride mixed with protective anxiety. David hung streamers while shooting worried glances toward the door, clearly hoping fewer people would show up than expected. Linda had arrived an hour early, ostensibly to help, but actually to position herself strategically to witness whatever disaster she was convinced would unfold. She stationed herself in the living room with a clear view of both the front door and Emma, wearing the expression of someone attending a funeral rather than a birthday celebration. The first guests arrived at 7. Chloe and Madison, Emma's closest friends after Maya. I watched them hug Emma carefully, like she might break, their voices artificially bright and cheerful. Emma noticed it too. I could see her shoulders tense slightly as she realized everyone was treating her like a fragile museum piece. More friends trickled in over the next 30 minutes. Each interaction followed the same pattern. overly gentle greetings, conversations that avoided any topic that might be remotely challenging, and glances in my direction as if seeking permission to act normally around my daughter. The atmosphere in our usually lively house felt stilted and artificial. Then Jake Morrison arrived, ironically Linda's grandson from her other son, carrying a speaker and completely oblivious to the careful choreography everyone else was performing. "Emma!" he called out, giving her the same enthusiastic hug he'd been giving her since middle school. "This place looks amazing. Did you do all this yourself?" For the first time all evening, Emma's smile looked genuine. "I had some help, but yeah, mostly me." "That's so cool. Hey, can I set up the music? I made a playlist I think you'll love." As Jake connected his speaker, the first song started playing, something upbeat and familiar that immediately shifted the energy in the room. A few people started moving to the music, and for a moment it felt like a real party instead of a careful performance. That's when disaster struck, or what everyone had been expecting to be disaster. Madison, gesturing enthusiastically while telling a story, knocked over a glass vase on the side table. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp, loud crash that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent room. Every single person froze, all eyes immediately turning to Emma, waiting for the panic attack they'd all been anticipating. I held my breath, ready to step in if needed. Linda actually started moving toward Emma, her "I told you so" expression already forming. But Emma surprised everyone, including herself. She looked at the broken glass, looked at Madison's mortified face, and then threw back her head and laughed. Not the polite, careful laugh she'd been using since the accident, but her real laugh, loud and genuine, and completely unguarded. "Well," she said, grinning at Madison, "that's one way to get everyone's attention." The room seemed to exhale collectively, and I saw the exact moment when everyone realized they could stop walking on eggshells. But Emma wasn't finished. She walked to the front door, opened it wide, and turned to face the room full of her friends. The music was still playing, but everyone had turned to look at her, sensing something important was about to happen. "I need to say something," Emma announced, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "I know some of you have heard things about me, about what I've been going through since the accident, and you're right, I have been struggling." The room was completely silent now except for the soft music in the background. "I've had panic attacks. I've cried in parking lots. I've had nightmares and bad days and moments where I wasn't sure I'd ever feel normal again." Her voice was steady, strong, completely authentic. "But look around you. Everything here was built by her." She pointed directly at me, and by me. "This house, this family, these friendships, this tradition of celebrating together. We built it, and no accident, no gossip, no fear is going to tear it down." The silence that followed wasn't awkward or pitying. It was the kind of silence that happens when someone says something so honest and brave that it takes a moment for everyone to process it. Then Chloe started clapping, slowly at first, then joined by Madison, then Jake, until the entire room erupted in applause that had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with respect. And Linda, standing in the corner, looked like she was seeing her granddaughter for the very first time. After Emma's speech, something magical happened that I never could have predicted. The careful, tiptoeing atmosphere that had characterized the early part of the evening completely evaporated. Instead of the polite, surface-level conversations I'd been dreading, Emma's honesty opened a door for everyone else to be real, too. Chloe, who had been walking on eggshells around Emma for months, suddenly found the courage to share her own struggles with anxiety. "I've been having panic attacks about college applications," she admitted. "I was so worried about bothering you with my problems when you were dealing with so much worse." Madison nodded, adding, "I've been seeing a therapist since my parents' divorce, but I was embarrassed to tell anyone. Hearing you talk about your struggles makes me feel less alone with mine." One by one, Emma's friends began sharing pieces of themselves they'd been hiding, creating the kind of authentic connection that had been missing from all their interactions since the accident. This wasn't a party where everyone pretended everything was perfect. It was a celebration of real friendship and genuine support. I watched from the kitchen as Emma moved through her party with confidence I hadn't seen in months. She wasn't performing strength or pretending to be okay. She was genuinely engaged, laughing at her friends' jokes, contributing to conversations, and showing interest in their lives. The difference was striking and beautiful, but perhaps the most surprising transformation was Linda's. After witnessing Emma's speech and seeing how her friends responded, my mother-in-law approached me in the kitchen where I was refilling snack bowls. "Sarah," she said quietly, "I owe you and Emma both an apology. I was wrong about her. I was wrong about this whole evening." "Linda, no, let me finish. I thought I was protecting her by encouraging her to hide from challenges. But what she did tonight, the way she faced her fear and took control of her own story, that took more courage than I've shown in years. I see now that strength isn't about avoiding difficulty. It's about facing it honestly." Later that evening, after most of the guests had left and we were cleaning up, Emma found me in the kitchen washing dishes. She grabbed a towel and started drying without being asked, something she hadn't done voluntarily since before the accident. "Mom," she said, "thank you for not listening to everyone who said I couldn't handle this. Thank you for proving them wrong." I almost proved them right, though. When I heard Grandma Linda and Mrs. Rodriguez talking, I almost gave up. I almost let their fear become my fear. I turned off the water and faced her. "But you didn't. That's what matters." "I learned something tonight," Emma continued. "All these months, I've been so focused on getting back to who I was before the accident. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is figuring out who I am now, with everything I've been through." The wisdom in that statement took my breath away. My 16-year-old daughter had just articulated something that many adults never figure out, that growth often comes not from returning to who we were, but from integrating our experiences into who we're becoming. 3 months later, Emma started a mental health awareness club at school. She used her experience to help other students understand that seeking help isn't weakness and that healing isn't linear. The club became one of the most popular organizations on campus, with students finding support and community in sharing their struggles instead of hiding them. Linda, true to her word, became one of Emma's biggest supporters. She volunteered to help with the mental health club's fundraisers and even shared her own story about dealing with depression after David's father died, something she'd never talked about openly before. As for me, I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do as a parent isn't to shield your child from potential failure, but to stand beside them while they take risks that matter to them. Emma didn't need me to fight her battles. She needed me to believe in her ability to fight them herself. That night taught our entire family that healing isn't about pretending trauma never happened or waiting until you're completely better to start living again. It's about choosing courage over comfort, authenticity over perfection, and connection over isolation. Emma's birthday party became legendary in our community, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And watching my daughter reclaim her strength and her story remains the proudest moment of my life as a mother. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't pretending to be strong. It's being honest about your struggles while refusing to let them define your entire existence. If Emma's story touched your heart the way it changed our family forever, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and supporting their courage to face their fears? Have you watched someone surprise you with their strength when everyone expected them to break? Your stories matter, and sharing them helps create the kind of authentic community that Emma discovered that night. One where people support each other through real struggles instead of pretending everything is always perfect. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear Emma's message about courage, healing, and the power of refusing to let trauma define your entire story. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real stories about real families navigating life's biggest challenges. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that might change your perspective or help you feel less alone in your own journey. Remember, sometimes the most important thing we can do for the people we love is believe in their strength, even when they're still learning to believe in it themselves. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.